Hi there, this is Jen, and thanks so much for stopping by today. Today I am creating a card using stencils and alcohol inks. It is something that is super fun that I absolutely love to do, and I'm using some awesome products from Visible Image from their latest release. The first one is this Daisy Grunge, a stamp set, and I absolutely love it. I love the fonts for the words, the flower with the script in it, and then the little bundle of daisies. I'm also going to use this Honeycomb Hex stencil for my background. And I'm also going to use one of the little bees from this Be Happy stamp set. And so let's go ahead and get started. I am using a mixture of mainly Marabou alcohol inks and different shades of pink. And I have, right now my card panel is 6x6. I end up cutting it down, but for now it is 6x6, and I am using Grafix craft plastic. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of alcohol ink and then take my dropper, and I'm actually using isopropyl alcohol. I don't have any of the blending solution, so this works just as well, I think, and it's what I use most of the time. I would just say that anytime you use alcohol inks, just make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. Some people can't handle the smell of it, of the alcohol or the inks, and so I just always make sure to take extra safety precautions, I guess you could say. And so I'm just taking a pipette and I'm grabbing a little bit of that alcohol and adding it to my panel. And then I'm going to take this baby aspirator and move that around. And so that's basically creating air, and that air is pushing the inks around on the panel. And I've used a little bit more of the isopropyl alcohol than I would normally use if I wasn't using a stencil, just because I want it nice and wet so that the stencil can kind of sink into that color and give me a kind of a decent impression. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but it is going to be so that you can see the design of the stencil. And once I place that down, I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun, and I am just making sure not to keep the heat on the panel. I am applying a little bit of the heat and then removing the heat just because I don't want to ruin my stencil, and I haven't ruined one yet, so it has worked so far. And the craft plastic is awesome because it does take heat really well, but if you do hold it on consistently, it will melt that as well, or bubble it up at least. But it does hold up a lot better, I found, than the Yupo paper. So that is why I use it a lot, and it is less expensive as well. And then I'm going to take my heat tool again and keep applying some heat to get more of that alcohol dried up. And then just to clean up is super easy. I just dip my baby wipe in the isopropyl alcohol and clean the stencil off. And then I'm going to add some splatter, of course. So I have a little bit of the isopropyl alcohol in my pipette, and I'm just going to add some splatter to the background. And then I grabbed a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock and the big daisy from the Daisy Grunge stamp, and I inked that up with some VersaFine black ink. And I'm going to cover that with some clear embossing powder, and then take my heat gun and melt that powder onto the image. And then to color up the flower, I'm going to use some of the Lindy's Magical Shakers. And the colors that I'm using for the center of the flower are Glittering Gold and Yodeling Yellow. And so it's a watercolor powder, so basically you're just going to add it where you need it and then activate that with water. And I am going to go ahead and then take my heat tool and dry that up a little bit and move that color around. And then for the flower portion, I am using, and I always mess up this name, it's called Letterhausen Laurel, I believe is what it's the name of it. And I'm going to follow that same process as I did for the center, just adding a little bit of that powder on the petals and then spraying with water to activate. And then I'm going to grab the, I believe the Yodeling Yellow, and add a little bit of that to the flower as well. And then once I have dried that with my heat tool, I am going to fussy cut the flower out. And I don't want any white outline around the image, so I'm going to go ahead and just cut right on that black line so that you don't have any of the kind of white border around the image. And then this flower would be really fun to stack like maybe 2 or 3 on top of this, and add a lot of dimension to it. But to add dimension to just the single flower, I'm taking my scissors and I am cutting every few petals from the outside of the petal to the center of that flower, and that's going to allow me to pop up a few of those pieces and add a little bit of dimension that way. And then I'm going to take the honeycomb stamp from the Be Happy stamp set, and I've already prepped my panel with my anti-static bag, and so I am just going to add some clear embossing ink to several of the areas with this honeycomb stamp. And then I'm going to take some gold embossing powder and add that to those honeycombs, and then I will take my heat tool and melt that powder. I also went ahead and cut my panel down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, I believe, and then I trim it up even more because I'm going to mat it onto another piece of cardstock. And then off camera, I went ahead and stamped up the bee from the Be Happy stamp set and fussy cut that out. So that was stamped up in Versmine black and then covered with clear embossing powder. And then for my background, or what I'm going to mat, I'm going to use a clear embossing ink dauber, and I'm just running that along the outside edges kind of to do a square. But if you have a watermark ink pad or a clear embossing ink pad, you can use that as well just by dragging it around the edges. And then I'm going to use that same gold embossing powder and add that, and then take my heat tool and melt that embossing powder. And then I'm going to take my panel, and I've added some pretty strong adhesive to the back of it just to make sure that it lies flat. And so I have gone ahead and added that, and I am going to mat it onto that gold panel so it's got a nice gold trim around the edges. And then I'm just taking a white Posca pen and adding a few little dots around the card. I have added the sentiment that says smile, so I have gold embossed that as well. And then here I'm just taking some I think they're diamond stickles and adding a little bit of that to the flower and the bee, and that's going to finish off this card. I really love this color combination, and I hope you do too. So I hope you liked this video. If you did like it or find it informative, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. As always, I thank you so much for stopping by and spending some time with me today, and I hope to see you next time.